thanks for babysitting the baby for a year." It felt as if we had parted ways just yesterday, with such a casual tone. It was as though she had forgotten about the terrible attitude she adopted the moment. My husband passed away and went to heaven. Then, I could hear Daniel's voice over the phone. "We're coming to pick her up now." I responded with the coldest voice I could muster. "Huh? I don't know such a child." This line had been practiced countless times over the past year. I thought I would have the opportunity to say it much sooner. It's unbelievable that he hadn't contacted us for a whole year after leaving our child behind. Huh? I left her at the entrance. Sarah seemed completely unaware of the seriousness of the situation. I carefully avoided sounding too contrived as I began to recite another prepared line. "What are you talking about? You didn't leave your beloved daughter with me. Don't tell me, you don't remember?" The long-awaited moment has arrived. It's time for her to regret deeply and reflect. I am Helen Reed, 51 years old. At the end of last year, my husband passed away and went to heaven. We were both remarried. My son, my own child, had already become independent and lived in a distant city by the time my husband and I got married. My husband's daughter, Sarah, was 17 at the time. I was worried about her being at a difficult age. But Sarah accepted me as a new member of the family. "Helen, do you want this lipstick? It was in a lucky bag. But I think this color suits you better than it does me." I felt saved by Sarah's friendly approach. Living with my new family was indeed happy. However, 12 years have passed since then. My husband fell ill, fought his sickness, and eventually lay in his coffin. My son and my husband's relatives rushed to the funeral, where my sister Kate patted my back as I slumped in sorrow. Kate, though she says she's my sister, we are identical twins, which means we look exactly alike. She understood my grief more than anyone else and comforted me. After the funeral, my son returned to his work immediately. Sarah and her husband, Daniel, lived close to our house. So they took it upon themselves to help with cleaning up the house and disposing of my husband's belongings. I thought everything my husband left behind should go to his real daughter. So I decided to give everything to Sarah. From the savings account under my husband's name to a pair of shoes. The car as well. I don't drive it by myself. He said the car was for me, but if you would like, could you take it? The young couple looked at each other and smiled happily. She was the beloved daughter of the person I loved, so I wanted her to be happy. I thought I would continue to cooperate and live well with Sarah. Really? Thank you, Helen. No, Mom. I too couldn't help but smile at her grateful words. However, Sarah, who had been tearful yet smiling pleasantly, suddenly became serious. What about the house and land? She seemed concerned that the deeds for the house and land were not among the things she could inherit. But the house my husband and I lived in after our remarriage was originally my family home. My parents decided to move and left it to me. I was surprised she didn't know this until now, but I regained my composure and explained. That house was originally my family's. Both the land and the house are in my parents' names. My parents are still healthy, so there won't be any talk of inheritance for a while. Look, they're right there, aren't they? I pointed to my parents who had attended the funeral. Then, Sarah and Daniel turned around and began to whisper to each other. It seemed they had assumed the house and land were also things they could inherit. The reflection of Sarah in the window twisted into a spiteful expression I had never seen before. And I shuddered. For a while, there was no word from Sarah and her husband. Even when I sent messages, they were read but not replied to. However, after 3 months, Sarah suddenly visited. She was wearing very relaxed clothes. I was happy to see her face after such a long time. Moreover, Sarah had some fantastic news to share. I have a baby in my belly. I was overjoyed. Thinking that this life was conceived right after my husband passed away felt like a rebirth. Congratulations. That's really wonderful. Let me know if there's anything I can help with. I imagined myself helping take care of the baby alongside Sarah, going shopping together. I truly dreamed of becoming a wonderful grandmother. Little did I know that I would come to regret saying this. By the way, how many months along are you? It was a casual question, but it made me realize my misunderstanding. Sarah answered nonchalantly. Almost 7 months. Then, she gently pressed her hands against her belly, showing off its rounded shape through her fluffy designed clothes. I couldn't tell at the funeral 3 months ago, but she was already pregnant at that time. The life I thought had been conceived after my husband passed was actually there during his illness. I wished she had at least told her father, my husband, while he was still alive. He had always said he wanted to see his grandchild's face before he passed. Ignoring my confusion, Sarah started to relax confidently in the living room. Even after dinner, when it was time to eat, she showed no signs of leaving. Eventually, past 8 p.m., Sarah suddenly said, "It's bothersome to go back home now, I'll stay over." Thanks in advance. I couldn't hide my surprise at Sarah's words. Staying over was fine, but where did she plan to sleep? The bed that belonged to her and her husband had been taken by them. And the bed Sarah used in high school was no longer here. I don't have a blanket except for my bed, what will you do? When I asked timidly, Sarah started whispering to Daniel. Then, while leaning back on the sofa, she looked up at me standing and said, "Then, that's fine. Daniel says he'll sleep on this sofa." I felt as if the words, "What about me?" got stuck in my throat. They were so unabashed that I began to wonder if I was the strange one. During this time, what was Daniel doing? He just turned away with an annoyed look. Then, suddenly standing up, he started rummaging through the fridge without permission. "Hey, there's nothing here. Got any beer or something? I want a drink, something other than tea and water." Even Sarah nodded at Daniel's words. It seemed they wanted me to buy something for them. I was left dumbfounded by their audacity. They left the next morning, after breakfast. Without so much as a goodbye. They just left while I briefly looked away. I even looked around a bit because I couldn't find them. After that, Sarah and her husband's sudden visits continued. They would come almost every week, staying for 2 or 3 days at a time. Eventually, I bought an inflatable mattress for myself because I couldn't keep giving up my bed every time. However, Daniel found it amusing and took it for himself. Reluctantly, I slept on the sofa when they visited. To be honest, it was a burden. But, having told them to let me know if they needed anything, I found it hard to refuse. I screamed involuntarily when Daniel took a shower and walked around dripping wet without a stitch on. When I finally complained that he should get dressed, he retorted, "Come on, that's nothing. Maybe you don't love us enough because we're not your real children?" Using the fact that he was a stepchild to guilt me. Daniel just smirked from a distance, not saying a word, which made me feel quite uncomfortable. A little over 3 months later, Sarah's daughter, Mia, was safely born. Though we were not related by blood, I was thrilled to have my first grandchild. Anne visited Sarah's house with great joy upon their discharge from the hospital. Then, holding Mia joyfully, Sarah showed her to me and said, "Look, Mia. It's a stranger old lady." Though her tone was teasing, I felt as if I had been slapped, thinking of her as my granddaughter. Then, Daniel began to speak with a laugh. "Hey, if you call her a strange old lady, we won't get the house." I felt incredibly upset and left quickly after giving them their gift. I just can't seem to get along with that couple. Sarah, who was just a normal gal before getting married, suddenly seems so distant to me. A month later, Sarah suddenly visited my house. Here. With just one word, she handed me something resembling a large bag at the entrance. I was shocked when I looked inside. There lay a baby, sleeping peacefully. Of course, it was Mia. The bag-like object appeared to be a baby basket. What? You're leaving her? Where are the diapers? The milk? When will you come back? They didn't answer and drove away. Time passed, but they didn't return. Unable to wander around with a baby who can't even hold her head up yet, I reluctantly asked Kate for help. Kate helped me buy the necessities and take care of everything, but I was utterly exhausted. I didn't mind taking care of her. However, it was outrageous to leave her all day without any prior notice. Late at night, after 8 p.m., Sarah and her husband finally returned. Without any thanks or apology, they naturally took me aback and said this. See ya. We'll come again on Monday, so please take care of her until then. I hurriedly stopped Sarah from leaving, forgetting to voice my concerns because I had plans to be out all day the next Monday. Wait. You mean the 16th, right? I can't, I'll be out all day. Can't you ask Daniel's parents? Sarah glanced back at me, huffed, and got into the car where loud music was playing. Daniel didn't even bother to look at me. Okay. Her curt response did not ease my anxiety. Feeling extremely worried, I called Kate to discuss the situation. That's definitely on your daughter-in-law and her husband. But it's also your fault for not saying anything. You're too accommodating. Oh well, can't be helped. If they show up, I'll give them a piece of my mind. Kate agreed to come over to my house. I apologized over the phone, feeling incredibly grateful. And then, early Monday morning, my worst fears about what Sarah and her husband might do were realized. It's October now, and the season is autumn. The mornings have gotten quite cold. We were having breakfast when we thought we heard a faint sound like a cat meowing. Hey, isn't that from the front door? As we approached the door, the sound grew louder. Kate cautiously opened the door, and we glimpsed the familiar baby basket placed there. Catching my breath at the sight of the basket, Kate stepped outside and closed the door behind her, leaving me standing dumbfounded inside. Then, I heard the sound of a car engine starting. We're going on a trip. Take care of her for a year. Bye. Hearing the loud voice, I nearly collapsed. Soon after, Kate returned inside with a grim expression. Looks like they were hiding in the car. But isn't the baby very cold? It doesn't feel like she was in the car until just before. Looking into the baby bed, I held Mia's hand, which was very cold. She seemed exhausted from crying and had a runny nose. We hurried to warm her up, but thought it best to take her to the hospital. Kate and I rushed to the hospital. While waiting for the billing at the after-hours window, we discussed our future plans in a heavy silence. Time passed, and a year later, I received a call on my smartphone from Sarah. Thanks for babysitting the baby for a year. Her tone was as light as if we had parted ways just yesterday. Then, I could hear Daniel's voice as well. We're coming to pick her up now. I pulled the phone away from my mouth to take a deep breath. This day had finally come. I recited the line I had practiced almost every day for a year. Huh? I don't know such a child. I think my voice came out quite cold and well, naturally filled with genuine anger. Sarah and her husband had been completely out of touch for the entire year. My home phone and even calls to my smartphone were met only with automated messages. The number you have dialed is either out of range or turned off. I tried every possible way to get in touch with Sarah. Messages went unread. Letters sent to their home probably remain unopened to this day. If they had seen either, they would have known where I am now. On the other end of the phone, Daniel made a small noise, either huh or what. And it sounded like Sarah was taking the phone from him. I waited patiently, and then Sarah started talking. Huh? I left her at the entrance. She said this with a giggle, as if the whole situation was amusing. It seemed she didn't realize the gravity of the situation at all. What are you talking about? You didn't leave your beloved daughter Mia with me. Don't tell me, you don't remember? I pressed on with my words. What came to mind was the image of Mia, left at the entrance a year ago. An unforgettable incident on October 16th. Kate and I had been so worried about Mia's cold body that we rushed her to the hospital. The doctor was shocked when we explained the situation. Naturally, anyone would be shocked to hear that instead of being handed over, she was left on the cold concrete of the entrance. The doctor said that given how cold she was, it couldn't have been just 5 or 10 minutes. Mia was admitted for a day as a precaution but fortunately only caught a cold. The doctor said it could have been pneumonia or hypothermia if she hadn't been so robust. The thought of what could have happened if we had found her later sends shivers down my spine. Huh? What are you talking about? I left her with you a year ago. Are you crazy? Sarah's voice grew lower, frustrated by my steadfast denial. I sighed before responding. You left her with Aunt Kate, not me. The day I was out, you left Mia with Kate, who was staying over to look after the house. You can't say you mistook her for me just because we're twins, after being family for 12 years. There was a pause for a few seconds. I could tell Sarah was confused. After all, Sarah had hardly ever spoken to Kate. The only time they met was briefly during my husband's funeral. She might know her name but probably doesn't remember what she looks like. Though we are twins, Kate and I do have our differences, including our hairstyles. I have short hair, while Kate's is long. However, on that morning when Mia was left, Kate had her long hair tied back, making it hard to distinguish from my shorter style from a distance. Understanding this, we deliberately chose to misunderstand that Sarah had entrusted Kate with Mia. This was the first part of our plan. Sarah, having known me so well, had completely underestimated me. Daniel, too, seemed to think that being a relative, even by marriage, I should tolerate everything. At least, that's how we felt. So, what would happen if a relative they hardly knew got involved? Kate has almost the same face as mine, but she and Sarah's family don't know each other well. Sarah and Daniel likely couldn't act as arrogantly with Kate as they did with me. The plan was to have strict Kate scold them thoroughly and make them reflect on their actions. I had thought you entrusted her to Kate because you didn't trust me. After all, I've only raised boys, but Kate has successfully raised 3 daughters. I was disappointed, thinking you must really dislike me since you went as far as to teach Mia to call me some unknown lady. I hit them with the fruits of my practice in one breath, reciting the long line I had memorized while my hands were busy typing on the computer. I was emailing Kate, our #1 ally, to inform her of the situation. Huh, then where is Mia? Isn't she with you? If she still thinks it's her house, that's wishful thinking. I solemnly inform her. Yes, she's at Kate's house. After all, it was Kate who took her in. Upon hearing my words, Sarah screamed in shock. Why isn't she at that house? That makes no sense. I thought if Mia lived there, it would become mine. As I grasped the murmured words, a giant question mark popped up in my mind. What is she talking about? Mia living there makes it Sarah's? That house? I tried desperately to think if there was such a law but couldn't come up with anything. Could this be some sort of bizarre logic? No, it's fine. You're at the house, right? I'll head there first. With that, Sarah hung up the phone. I hurriedly redialed. Each ring felt unbearably long, seconds stretching like hours. Just when I thought she'd ignore my call, Sarah picked up after a few rings. I'm not there. I've moved. I rushed to say, and Sarah exclaimed, "What?" I braced for further questions, but there was no follow-up. Reluctantly, I continued. I've been trying desperately to contact you because it's always disconnected. You see, I'm living in my parents' apartment now to take care of them. This relates to when I refused to take Mia a year ago because I had plans to go out early in the morning. In fact, that day, I was supposed to meet my parents. They built our family home, but after my father retired, they moved to a smaller apartment in the city. My father injured his back and needed assistance. Since my mother is petite and struggled to support him, they called me for help, now that I'm alone. Why didn't you tell me sooner? After hearing my explanation, Sarah spoke in an accusatory tone. I just shrugged, mixing a droplet of a lie into the truth. I thought I'd be back in about a week. I never expected it would turn into a year. But it can't be helped, my parents are getting old and need assistance. Originally, I truly thought I'd be back in about a week. That it turned into a year of living together was a complete surprise and entirely truthful. The droplet of a lie was that even if I could return, I no longer wished to go back to that house. Sarah leaving Mia changed my mind. As long as I lived there, Sarah and Daniel might repeat their behavior. Worried about this, Kate and I decided it was best to change my residence. That was the second part of our plan. Keeping those who take too much for granted too close wasn't wise. Maintaining a proper distance was our goal. Wait, so the house is empty now? Great, I'll live there. Sarah suddenly realized, sounding inexplicably happy. I was taken aback when Daniel's voice followed. Thanks. We'll take good care of it. I frantically waved my hands, no, then realized that gestures don't convey over the phone. The frustration of not being able to communicate face to face was unbearable. I wished I could fly to Sarah and Daniel's side right then. Wrong. Kate is living in that house. Go pick up Mia right away, she's there. Right after I finished speaking, a loud thud was heard. It seemed like the smartphone was dropped. Perhaps after hearing the situation from Daniel, Sarah's angry voice could faintly be heard. Then, the call ended abruptly. What follows is a story I heard from Kate later on. The characters in this story are Kate and Mia, along with Sarah and Daniel. Kate is a born tough mom through and through. Her husband, appearing as an addition, is a gentle man. About an hour after the phone call ended, Sarah and Daniel barged into the house where Kate and her husband live. The suntanned couple arrived, pulling suitcases with stickers on them. In a festive mood, seemingly oblivious to the gravity of leaving a baby behind. Hey! Why is a stranger living here? Sarah yelled. The volume was so intense it made ears ring. Sure, to Sarah, Kate might seem like a stranger. However, Kate is the daughter of the house's owners, her living there is not at all strange. It's utterly disappointing how Sarah can only see the world from her perspective. My parents gave me this house as a living inheritance. Helen has been living here long enough, it's time to pass it on to Kate, they said. It was about half a year ago. Kate informed them with a broad smile. By this time, Kate had already been informed by me and realized that Sarah and Daniel's intention was to acquire the house. Knowing that they were freeloading when I lived there, all with the aim of getting the house, she felt no need for mercy. There could have been leniency if it was just familial dependence from a daughter-in-law. But with the motive being the property, kindness was out of the question. Hence, she had the house put in her name by asking her parents. What? Why wouldn't you give it to me? That's terrible. Sarah screamed, her hair in disarray, wondering why she desired such an old house so fervently. Kate sighed, unable to comprehend Sarah and Daniel's reasoning. Why did you even think it would be yours? You knew it belonged to our parents. Who they leave it to is their decision, but it definitely wouldn't be you. If you're talking about grandchildren, there are 4 others who are blood-related. Sarah groaned and fell silent. Kate was concerned that Mia's name hadn't come up in the conversation but decided to press on. Besides, even if it was Helen's property, doesn't she have a son? Did you forget about your stepbrother? It couldn't possibly become yours alone. And really, why do you want this run-down house so much? Then, Daniel began to mumble something significantly relevant. But probably shouldn't have been mentioned. Because, I heard they're going to widen the road here. Thought it might turn into some money. Hey. Sarah hastily interrupted him, but it was too late. Kate nodded deeply, understanding the situation. Apparently, Sarah and Daniel were hoping for compensation from road expansion plans. We were unaware, but since Daniel works in construction, he might have heard rumors at his job. The road in front of the house lacks a sidewalk. Yet it's used as a route to a nearby school and is fairly busy due to a supermarket nearby. Perhaps they plan to add a sidewalk. Even if it's just by 3 feet, the administration might pay a decent amount for it. Well, why don't you come in? You want to see Mia, don't you? You can even stay over if you like. Kate said this with a particularly bright smile. Despite knowing their true intentions, it seemed the third part of our plan had been set into motion. Our final scheme was for Kate and her husband to straighten out Sarah and Daniel. Particularly Daniel's behavior. Despite being in his in-laws' house, his manners were lacking. With Kate's less indulgent personality, the plan was to properly scold them and improve their behavior. Unaware of this, Sarah and Daniel looked at each other and smirked, entering the house with satisfaction. Right away, as if still holding on to that bizarre logic of live in it and it's yours. They began to make themselves comfortable as if it were their own home. But Kate wasn't the type to overlook such behavior. For instance, when Daniel, in both senses of the word, wandered around dripping wet after a bath, Kate's booming voice filled the house. What kind of appearance is that, huh? Don't you have any shame? How old do you think you are? Don't walk around wet. You're wetting the floor of someone's house, go change and clean it all up. Being a mother of 3 and a physical education teacher, Kate's scolding was full of vigor. Daniel, scolded severely by an aunt who looked so much like his lenient mother-in-law, was taken aback. Sarah, too, found no respite. Lazing around in the living room, she was met with Kate clapping her hands loudly right in front of her. What are you sitting around for? In this house, those who don't work, don't eat. Help out. The ever-so-tough Kate made Sarah work hard, teaching her the tricks to laundry and cleaning. Sarah seemed to loathe it to the point of tears, but it was oddly useful. Being capable of everything, Kate must excel at household chores. I even feel like learning from her next time. And what dealt the biggest blow to Sarah and Daniel was, astonishingly, Mia. There's a reason Mia hasn't appeared in the story until now. She became shy around Sarah and Daniel, clinging to her beloved grandpa, Kate's husband, refusing to leave the room. Mia, it's mommy, I'm home. As Sarah approached with open arms, Mia cried out in fear as if scorched by fire. It's not surprising. At 1 year old, having been abandoned at 0, Sarah was completely a stranger to Mia. Daniel was devastated, expecting a joyful reunion with his daughter who didn't recognize him at all. He ended up glaring at Mia with resentment, suggesting, "This isn't Mia, is it?" which further infuriated Kate. Sarah and Daniel were under the mistaken impression that Mia would naturally love and long for them despite being left for so long. Such wishful thinking is beyond astonishing and veers into terrifying. One wonders what goes on in their minds. After Mia, exhausted from crying, retreated to the bedroom with Kate's husband, Kate showed Sarah and Daniel photos of Mia's growth. The album was filled with adorable pictures of Mia smiling. From a floppy baby to her current alert self. For a child just over a year old, a year is almost a lifetime. There's no way she'd remember you as her parents, Kate remarked, and after seeing all the photos, Sarah and Daniel cried silently. Finally realizing the invaluable time with their child they had forsaken for leisure and greed. It would be a neat story if the two had a change of heart here, but that's not the case. My punishment for them still awaited. Kate did not tolerate poor manners. I believe Mia hasn't forgiven the lack of love. And as a parent, I could never forgive them for endangering baby Mia by leaving her out in the cold. The next morning, I visited Kate's house with several sturdy men, all with Kate's consent. It was mid-October. Unbelievable to leave her at the front door. As the doctor said, it was a dangerous act that could have had serious consequences. While explaining, I rang the doorbell. The men showed their police badges to Kate, who opened the door. I had brought the police with me. Together with Kate, when we had taken Mia in, we immediately consulted the police. Having been advised that it was a prosecutable offense, we contacted them again to deal with the two upon their return. We ambushed Sarah and Daniel, who were casually having breakfast. What have you been doing all this time? How could you think to leave her out in the cold just to ensure she was abandoned? The doctor said it could have been dangerous if her body temperature had dropped any lower. I don't think you two deserve to be parents. My voice trembled with anger. The two had gone to Hawaii, enjoying a year of unfettered leisure, according to Kate's tip-off. Moreover, they were expecting another child, currently 4 months pregnant. Unbelievable. Daniel was surprised to learn that Mia had been in more danger than he thought. But Sarah reverted to her haughty demeanor the moment she saw me. Unaware that the people behind were police officers, she snorted in her usual manner. Annoying. We just wanted to have fun. It would have been better if you hadn't said you couldn't take her. It's your fault if Mia was freezing. Saying this irritably, Sarah reached out to grab the frightened Mia. But a police officer stopped her hand. The officer introduced himself and explained calmly why they were there, and I listened solemnly. Realizing she might be arrested, Sarah began to wail and thrash about. Restrained by both a female and a male officer, desperately pleading for my help. I could only bite my lip and look down. Despite thinking of them as important family, what they did to Mia was unforgivable. Daniel tried to flee at full speed but was easily caught and fell to the ground. Both were then placed in a patrol car and taken away. 2 months later, the sentence for Sarah and Daniel was decided. Due to the severity of their actions and lack of remorse, they were sentenced to years of service. Despite seemingly reflecting on their actions thanks to Mia and Kate, their sullen attitude in court worsened the judge's impression. Furthermore, they blamed each other, leading to their divorce. Pregnant Sarah gave birth in prison. The child was temporarily placed in a foster care facility before I took them in. Despite Sarah crying daily with regret, it's nothing but the result of her own actions. Daniel also expressed deep regret. I even received an apology from Daniel's parents, who apparently decided to disown their son. A pitiful story, with nowhere to go after release. A year has passed. I've taken in both children Sarah gave birth to. Additionally, my son, who returned home, and my parents are living together with us. We chose a lifestyle where we all live together in a large house. Supported by Kate's family and Daniel's parents, making the child-rearing process smooth. Daniel's mother, close in age to me, has become a good friend. We exchange photos of grandchildren and cats. I'm striving to create an environment where my grandchildren can thrive. Recently starting to grow flowers to teach them compassion. I hope to care for them with my grown grandchildren someday. Sarah and Daniel are still behind bars. Mia calls my son daddy, and Mia grandma. I believe I should eventually tell them about their biological parents, but for now, I want them to grow up feeling loved. The second child is a boy. Mia, despite her young age, acts like a caring older sister, comforting and watching over her brother when he cries. Seeing this endears them to me even more each day. Being adored by my lovely grandchildren fills my days with happiness.